My name's Steve Hassenplug, and I'm going to talk a little bit about being an VEX IQ event partner. There's a couple things we're going to talk about today. How to run an event, what's required, who can attend, teams, a tournament versus league versus skills, the cost, the tournament manager software, a little bit about advancing to state, and I actually have quite a few slides about COVID-19, and finally who to contact. First of all, the question is, why run an event? Well, this is a good no-cost guarantee for your teams. You know they're going to get into an event. It may be difficult to find events this season. We need to get as many event partners as we can because we'll probably have a lot of small events. So this is a chance for you to lock your teams into one or two events. Your program will be able to earn a little bit of money from the entry fees and maybe from concessions. Finally, it creates something of a deadline for your teams so that they know when they need to be ready to compete or what their deadline is, because we all kind of need deadlines. So what's required to run an event? Well, the tournament manager software is provided by REC. It takes care of all of the scheduling, all of the scoring, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. You also need school gym, the time that you can use, reserve time, and make sure you get approval from your administration. This is going to vary for your school, and it may vary around the event time. So make sure that leading into this that your school is prepared for having teams come over. There are a handful of volunteers you need pretty much no matter how you run the event. The computer person and the head ref are two of the most important people at the event. Also make sure that generally when you run an event, you're better off if you don't assign yourself a task. That way you can always make sure that everything else is going as it should. Who can attend? Well, your teams can attend your event at no cost. Through the Robot Events website, you'll get other teams that can learn about your event and sign in. They can see in advance when your event is and register for it as soon as registration opens. There will be good teams that show up for your event, so you generally can't count on winning your event as the best team because none of the good teams show up. So the good teams will seek out the events and find ways to compete. This is a good chance for you to compete against the best teams. What if no teams show up? Teams will show up. They will. Your event will probably fill up. This year it's going to be very difficult to get enough events for the teams that we have. So one of the questions is whether or not we want to run a single day tournament or a season-long league. And something that's kind of new this year is a skills-only event. And we'll talk a little bit more about the options here later. But with a single-day tournament, it's nice to have a single event and have it over with. This is usually, in my mind, it's a little bit better for the competitive teams, the teams that are here to try to win the trophy, the teams that want to make it to the state tournament. The league is a little bit better for the classroom teams. Usually they'll be meeting all season. They'll have multiple league sessions. Sometimes the league meetings are shorter, so it's better for the students that may not be able to stay in one place quite as long. One of the things that's being recommended this year is that we can host instead of running 3 qualifying sessions and the final session, you can run 6 qualifying sessions and only invite half the teams to each one of those qualifying sessions, and then we'll still have the right number of teams at the final. This gives a little bit less interaction with so many kids at one time. Something that's new this year is a skills only event. This is where teams are going to show up and just run skills. There won't be any teamwork matches. The teams will all still be limited to just 3 skills runs, 3 driver runs, and 3 program runs, so a total of 6 runs maximum. Maximum of 3 driver or 3 program. For collecting money, the nice thing about REC, we've got the Robot Events website set up to pretty much take care of all the money for you. So teams can get on the website. You can set the cost. In the past, it's been about $30 a team. That's up to the event partner. I'm not sure that we have a good recommendation this year, depending on the size of the event. But the Robot Events website will take care of collecting the money, whether it's a check, a credit card, a PO, and at the end, after the tournament's over, they'll write the check to your school, give you a little bit of money for the time that your team spent. You can run as many tournaments as you want to during a season. REC will provide you trophies for the first event that you run. So you won't have to buy the trophies, which you need to make sure and order them. But the trophy pack is about $120. There may be grants available for new event partners. That's something that you can talk to George about. The Tournament Manager software will basically run all of the logistics of the tournament. It will go to the Robot Events website, download the team list. It will generate the match list, calculate the rankings, and at the end of the day, it will tell you which teams to hand the trophy to. So teams advancing to state is going to be a big question this year. How many teams will advance from your event? This process is totally up in the air while we try to determine how the state event is going to be handled completely. At this point, it doesn't look like teams will be guaranteed a state spot. In the past, we've had a certain number of state spots, and then any other available spots for the state tournament were filled from the skills list. This year, we may not have any guaranteed state spots, in which case all of the teams will come from the skills list. So, again, as you've probably been told a couple times, skills is important. That may be your path to get to the state tournament. So now we have a couple COVID-19 contingencies. A few things we're asking you to do. The pits should be spaced a little bit farther apart, 8 feet apart, not sharing any charging stations, limit the volunteers to just the essential roles. Don't allow the students to reset the field. And this is one that I really hate because it's one of my favorite parts. We're going to discourage handshakes and high fives this year. Also, we'll try to keep the queuing areas from being overcrowded with by putting up enough signage that everybody knows exactly where they're supposed to go and how far spread out they should be. A couple other things to minimize the interaction. We're going to run, you could potentially run fewer qualification matches and limit the number of teams in the playoffs and in the finals. Suggestion is not to have concessions. That does make it a little bit harder on the parents. We want to make sure that you're using the event meeting at the start of the day to share any location-specific information about the safety protocols or anything like that. And we can also designate traffic one way around the fields to make sure that everybody's flowing the same direction. And of course, we're going to pretty much require participants to wear face masks, face coverings when appropriate. So one of the big things that we'll talk about, actually I got a little bit more about that coming up, is the skills only event. So we're not doing, we have the potential of running tournaments that don't have the teamwork aspect, only the skills aspect to it. These won't have any other awards like the Judges Award or the notebook, things like that. It'll just be doing some skills runs. Then these runs will count towards the end of the season when we're figuring out who's going to the state tournament. It's been suggested we can do some virtual judging for these. This is going to be kind of tricky to implement. Probably something that maybe some of the more experienced event partners can look into. We're going to be allowed to limit the number of to have less than 16 teams at an event. In order for that to happen, you're going to have to get special approval, but that is a possibility for that to happen. This includes if your school is running a league, or your school corporation is running a league, and you've got 10 or 12 schools or teams in the league, then with some special approval, you should be able to do that. We're looking into all the possibilities to get as many teams to participate in events as possible. Also, an idea is to actually limit the number of participants that are allowed to come to the tournament. So maybe just the drivers and one or two other people. Also, there's a possibility of limiting the number of spectators, number of parents per kid. So a couple different ideas there. In the past, we've sort of limited the number of invitational events, which are events where you can invite specific teams to your tournament. We're trying to open that up again to be as flexible as possible to expand the number of invitational events as needed. So a couple ideas for event schedules given the COVID-19. One of the main ones that I thought of is just running a half-day tournament. A shorter day with 16 teams. You can do a morning tournament or an afternoon tournament and still get in a good number of teamwork runs or and the right number of skills runs. You get all that in that limited time. Even if you are doing that, that actually opens up the potential of having 2 tournaments in your school in one day. So you would have 32 teams come in. Of course, a team could only participate in one of those tournaments, could not do both of them. But you could have 32 teams, 16 in the morning, reset, wipe down, start up again in the afternoon, and run for another 4 hours. It will make for a long day for the volunteers, but I think that may be better than 2 different tournaments. So that's a good idea to help us get some more tournaments in, and maybe to help you get some more teams. So we also have leagues. We've talked a little bit about the leagues. One of the good ideas we have for scheduling that is to have half the team show up at one session, half the team show up at another. You'll probably want to make sure that you're not selecting the same teams paired together for every half session. So you don't want the first half of the roster to show up for their sessions and the second half to show up for their sessions and never have them intermixed. You'd like to intermix them. We may have to see, if you have questions on how to do that, we can set it up in Tournament Manager. There's a lot of configuration available in Tournament Manager. You can control which teams are in the list and which are not. Again, when you do this, if you only have half the teams, you'll have to have double the sessions. There is another setting that says the teams have to show up for a certain number of sessions. So need to make sure that we get that set correctly before your event takes place. Finally, one of the big ones is the skills only event. This is something that's pretty much wide open for how it's handled. We haven't done this in IQ, but so this is pretty much new for IQ, where teams can show up. They'll just run their skills runs, and then they can either leave or potentially stick around in case they want, in case there's awards for it. But this would be something that you could easily run an all-day event where teams may schedule when they're going to show up. They may show up for an hour or a half hour. They'll get in their 6 runs, and then they'd be free to go home. What I would like to see is where a team shows up, they can walk over to the table, they can run their robot 6 times, and then they're done. A lot of times when we do that, we'll find some variation, and they may want to make some changes. We may give them a 1-hour time block or something like that, where they can run their skills run, go back to their table, make some tweaks to the robot if they need to, and then work their way back in line to the skills. We should have, assuming that we're setting up time blocks, this should be a pretty short line. There may only be a small handful of teams that are in line trying to get on the field, so they should have time probably within an hour to get in all their skills runs and do any tweaking that they need to do. I think you should be able to have maybe 8 teams in that block of an hour to do all their runs. So it sounds like with 8 teams, if you're going to do 4 hours, you could probably do 32 teams have their skills runs in a 4-hour time block. That might be a really good way for teams to get in all the runs. That's pretty much it. We're open to questions now. If you do have more questions, you can talk to Randy. He can help you out. George will tell you anything you need to know about the state tournament when time comes, or also the event partner grants. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.